everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for this Highland dancing discussion, which is featuring as part of Cowal's virtual gathering in 2020. Delighted to be joined by three Highland dancing greats, and I'm very excited to have them here with me. First of all, I'll introduce, we have got Cheryl Fisher, 7-time US champion and very successful also at Cowal, winning a 3rd and a 5th place in the world as well. We've got former world champion Helen FitzPatrick from Scotland. Helen won in 1983, and she was also winner of an interesting event, which we might talk about, Helen, which was the World Champions Challenge. I think it was about 1986. That's about the only time I think I can recall dancing with you, Helen. But I think it'd be great to touch on that maybe as well. And also, absolutely delighted, we've got a world-class dancing legend with us in Heather Jolley from Canada, teacher of 2 world champions, hundreds of other championships that were won in Heather's dancing school, past president of Scott Dance Canada, and of course recognised by the board and presented with the Athol clasp in 2006. So welcome everyone, delighted to have you on. I'm going to go straight into some questions. I'm going to start with you, Heather, first of all, and I'm going to ask you some which probably you would expect me to do, which is, what is your earliest memory of coming across to the Cowal Gathering?
Well, I came across the first time in 1959. I didn't dance. I don't know why I didn't dance, but in thinking about it, I think maybe it was because the dances were all like I think the fling was 8 steps and the swords was 4 and 2 and the chantreuse was 6 and 2. I probably thought, forget it, I'm not doing that. And I don't know. That's the only reason I can think for not dancing, because I did dance at the festival in Edinburgh and where else, Boyne and a few of those places. But I had become friendly actually with Gordon Yates through J.L. Mackenzie. And Gordon was from the same town as my dad was, Tarvis in Aberdeenshire. So we spent time in Tarvis and I got to know Gordon. And so I went to Cowal because he was going to Cowal, I think, for the first and only time. So, we went to watch him dance, and of course he won. And that was pretty exciting. But that was my first trip, 1959.
And how about the first time you danced at Cowal then Heather, coming across? So you were there obviously.
I've never danced at Cowal.
Never once competed at Cowal. Is that something that's maybe a small tiny regret in you that you never managed to once come across?
Probably.
Yeah.
I've been to Cowal probably 55 times. And, I've been over since 1959. I've been at Cowal probably, certainly in the 50 times. I've been at least 52 or 53 and maybe more, but I've never danced. One of the reasons is because of course, it was a big deal to go to Scotland in 1959. You had to save your money for 2 years before you went. And then it was slow boat to China. You weren't sort of going on. And I mean, it was an expedition, really, because you went for a long time. You didn't just fly over and back like they do now. So yeah, it was an experience. And I regret it in a way. But, I've been so many times with pupils now that it doesn't seem like, it just seems like it's like going home actually. I know Scotland, particularly Glasgow, almost as well as I know Vancouver.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And it's, one of the things I always enjoyed at Cowal was on the stage, looking at the number of greats sitting in that stand, facing you as you dance, watching every single count you did, not missing anything. Okay, you were getting judged by the 3 in front of you, but you were also getting judged by the audience. And the audience that didn't miss anything, and sometimes you heard, oohs and ahs and, applause. It's like no other event I think I've ever been at, Heather.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a little bit intimidating, I think, for the first-time dancer. And I think that I always tell my pupils, you need to go one time to just get the lay of the land, and then go back the next year and do a better job.
But that's possible now. Yeah, when did you first come across Cheryl?
I came across in 1980 when I was 15. That was my first year. So I came across with Mrs. Reed, and I didn't have any idea what I was getting into. I knew I was coming across to stay with family, and I just thought it was going to be like competing, just a different set of competitors. And I was so naive, and I just started right off. I remember starting off in Aberdeen at the Aberdeen Championships in a deluge. I have never seen rain. And I said to her, well, won't they move us indoors? And she was like, oh, No, dear. No. And I don't think I've ever been that wet in my life as Aberdeen. And that was my first summer, was basically everywhere I went, I got soaked. So it was an interesting experience because I lived with my grandmother's older sister and her husband and my cousin who was blind. And I lived in a little pensioner house in Craignook, just around the corner from Ravenscraig. I had my own library card, which is really kind of, I had a library card in Craignook for years. And I walked everywhere. I took public transportation. When I wasn't dancing, I was off to the aunties, delivering eggs and having tea and doing the dishes. And I loved it. I loved every minute of it. It was such a different way, even though so much of it was natural to me because of my gram, I didn't adjust to food or the accent, although my cousin's in Fife, I still can't understand that. But it was just a different way to do. And the dancers were just amazing. I remember you, Deryck, you were just a wee boy back then, in their little green kilt. And I remember watching Helen win her championship. And of course, the great Jennifer Lindsay was awe-inspiring. And I remember I thought I was good until I got to Scotland. And then I realized I had so much work to do to even belong on the stage. And I went home and I worked. And I wanted to go back. As soon as I got home, I wanted to go back.
Yeah, and I think Heather, you're absolutely spot on. I think you need to be across and see that atmosphere and be part of that atmosphere, in order for you to actually then, some dancers are special, very, very special.
Mm-hmm.
We're lucky to have a few of them that, can just turn up in the first year and do brilliantly. But,
Mm-hmm.
you need to get used to that because it is an intimidating place. Absolutely it is. How about you, Helen? When did you first dance at Cowal?
In 1974. I danced in the 13 and under 16 age group when it was just one age group. I was a very raw. I'd only started dancing probably 2 years before then. So I went to Cowal. Irene told me what it was going to be like, but I went and I think that the memory of my very first Cowal is very clear in my head, more so than some of the others. I got nothing. There was only 3 dances then. But I remember dancing in a group of 93 dancers, and it was when it was the Saturday morning. Everything was done on the same day.
Mm-hmm.
So on the Saturday morning, you were at the side platform, no obviously a canopy over the stages, and you just danced no matter what. And I just remember the lineup, how long it took to get through each dance, because obviously so many dancers, and it was just I came back from that, and I actually said to my dad, 13 and whatever, I says, right, Dad, that's me. I've now got my vision. I'm going to be world champion one day. And what goal can you set? Got nothing. Not even a final, not even anything. But it was something that I set, and I think it was because my grandfather was a world champion wrestler, so I always knew, this was something. And I speak to my dad about it, and he says, if you want something enough, you work hard enough at it. Yeah. Sometimes these dreams happen. So that's I remember very, very clearly. Why it was so clear dancing there, coming away, and it was just motivating and inspiring.
Brilliant. And you need a team for that success. So you got the bug first time you were there. Obviously, you had a great teacher in Irene, was continuing along with Nadine to produce some great pupils as well. So, what can you remember in the early days about Irene trying to prepare you for Cowal and improving and picking up better prizes? What can you remember about that?
What I would remember, Irene was very much I remember it's very much the basics. You worked hard in the basics. You worked hard on your fitness and your technique, and it wasn't a matter about beating the next person. It was about being the best version of yourself. And it wasn't about jumping higher than the next person or the like. It was just doing what you could do the very, very best. So it was just a lot of it was, just repetition, to be honest. Irene's, the fact that she had been there before, you know, it was helpful. It's, you know, she could tell you what you need to prepare yourself for. But it was all about, you know, just being the best version of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving forward then to when you won in 1983, Helen, what can you recall about that? I mean, it's, you know, I remember some of my wins at Cowal, you know, a couple in particular where when I finished, I came off the reel and thought, that's as good as I can do. You know, had that feeling, which was, I'd done 4 really good dances. At that point, it was up to the judge. You know, what can you recall back? You know, was that everything hit the right notes, everything was in place, all the preparation came together, and you finished and said, you know, that's as good as I can do. Let's see what happens.
Yes, Deryck, and I think to put into perspective here that I actually only won my first championship in 1982. Right, I won the Commonwealth Championships in 1982, which at that time were the week before Cowal, and I couldn't dance at Cowal because Irene was judging. So, you know, you come off the cusp having been runner-up in various aspects in championships, but having won, and it was Jennifer Lindsay, I think was runner-up in the championship in '82 in the Commonwealth, and not being able to dance at Cowal, it gave me such drive to really say, well, next 1983 is going to be my year. And I just kept saying that to myself, 1983 is my year. So in my preparation, that was the mantra, shall we say. So I remember stepping on those boards, and I remember saying to myself, when you do your qualifier part, which was the Saturday morning, I just relax, just enjoy this, because this is going to be your year. And it was just, I don't know, I was lucky. I know I was lucky because there's luck involved in it. But the mental attitude, I didn't put any stress on myself. Yeah. I didn't put any strain. It was just, let's try and relax. Because as a dancer, I could go over the score. I was quite driven and I could be a bit wild. But I know that day, there was a sereneness about how I felt. And at the end of it, I was, you know, as you said, I came away like you're feeling, I did what I could do. I wasn't going, should have done that, should have done the next thing. It was more a matter of, I did all my preparation. They say, you know, you've got to prepare. I knew I was prepared. I knew I had an injury-free summer. I knew I was prepared. So it was just, I gave it what I could, and I was lucky on the day.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing. I'm going to come to you, Heather. I think, you know, to succeed at Cowal, you need a few things that get together. You know, one is some great tuition and some drive. Helen was obviously very hungry that year, set herself up to succeed, you know, so she went in there with confidence as well. You do need some luck. You know, it's you absolutely need luck. Sometimes, you know, the judging panel, the mix doesn't quite suit you, or, you know, or the timing of the piper doesn't quite suit you as well. And then, of course, you need that great coach behind you as well. Heather, I'm keen to maybe get some insight from you as to, you know, how did you go about preparing some of the pupils that you had that came across and succeeded at Cowal? You know, did you do anything different the years that you knew they were coming across and they were going to be a contender, or, you know, or was it just the same?
Well, you know, any good teacher knows who might be the contenders, I think. But I don't know whether I would say there was any special preparation. I'm a great believer in what I think Helen was just saying. You know, you've got to be prepared in yourself. You've got to know that you've got all the blocks placed correctly and they're all aligned. And I think that it's the back practice and whatnot that goes on in April, May, and June that really, I think, is when the good work is done. When it comes to Cowal, you've got to be ready, I think. And like you say, I think you have to have luck. I think luck is a huge factor, to be honest with you. And I've said this many times before. As far as training dancers is concerned for Cowal, I'm a great believer in teaching people to dance to their capability. Not necessarily, I mean, not everyone's going to be a champion, and certainly not everybody's going to be a world champion. But I like to see dancers dance as well as they possibly can. So obviously when they get to Cowal, you want them to be dancing at peak performance. But I don't think it's a magic wand. I think that it's got to be a lot of pre-preparation, you might say, and luck has got to be on your side. Like you say, you have to have just all the things aligned, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are sometimes these fine margins, between touching a sword or, losing your
Yeah.
balance. It's just not feeling right in the morning when you get up as well. There are really fine margins. Cheryl, the year you were third in the adults, again, did you find that clicked for you? I know you were dancing in, a very, very tough era, in that
Oh,
point. Well, incredibly tough, trying to break through what you were trying to do. But I
oh,
think getting third in the adults that year was phenomenal.
it was. It was like Helen said, I had luck on my side. I mean, that was in the day when we qualified in each dance, and I
Mhm.
only qualified in 2 dances, and they weren't my strongest 2 dances. And I remember thinking, I've only got 2. I've only got 2 shots at this. And I think that, and I can remember Mrs. Reed sitting there, just like, I'm sure like Irene was and Heather was like, you've done the work. You've done the work. Go up and execute the work. And I can remember that. And I remember it really strongly. That was a bizarre year. That was the year it rained so badly. We had to be put into the Queen's Hall for the finals. I
Mhm.
didn't even wear my own kilt. My kilt was so sodden. I had to wear someone else's kilt in the finals.
Yeah.
So, and I don't have a single picture of any of that because I never had a parent with me that had a camera. So I have no visual memories. The only memories I have are what live in my head. So
That was 85, wasn't it? Is that right?
it was 85. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And margin, that was again, the scrutineering was 853, 1.5 and a quarter. And the margin between 1 and first and third, I can remember because I went and I looked, it was 1.5 points. That was the margin. And I thought, and my initial thought was, gosh darn it, I was close. And then once you sit back and you realize you're like, wow, I can't believe I'm standing on the stage with the top 6 people that I was standing on the stage with.
Mhm.
So it was a really crowning moment for me. I really felt like I had more in me, but it was great. It was really great.
Yeah, that was an incredibly tough year.
It was
We talked about that yesterday actually
it was.
with Gareth on the video about the swords outside and coming back inside and redoing the swords inside and
Mhm.
the monsoon that was coming down, everything was wet, pumps were wet,
Everything was
we
wet.
were trying to warm back up again. It was a phenomenal year for people I think just to actually finish the events and actually be standing there getting prizes. It's probably one of the toughest kills I think we've had.
And
That
I
kill.
think the cowl brings out resilience. You see what dancer can deal with the punches, that are resilient. Who can, if it's cold in the morning and then it warms up, or if it's wet in the morning and then it dries out. You see they cope with so
Mhm.
much, not only just the pressure of competing and performing in front of the judges, not to mention all of Highland dancing that's facing them. They also have to contend with the weather and all the other factors that go into competing at Cal. I got and they're kids. They're kids. We were just kids. So it's amazing what they're able to accomplish.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Helen, I'm going to ask you a question. Cheryl mentioned the point system, the old point system we had, and I know you came very close to defending that world title. So you won it in '83, and in '84, you tied, and it was an interesting year for the results that year, the way
Hmm.
the prizes went, and and eventually, the eventual winner was Leslie Bowman, winning Leslie's only worlds that as well. What can you recall about that day, Helen, about the whole thing and how that went?
I don't remember very much of '84, and it's really strange. Other than the results, it's really strange. It's almost as if it's been parked somewhere in that dark secret part of your brain. And I think it's because, as you said, just because I was so close but so far. Because it's wonderful to say that you're a world champion, but it'd be really nice to say that you were a 2 times world champion. Yourselves how it goes. The results were very mixed. I came in every dance. I remember that. My top place was a second place. And the way it worked, it was out. Everybody was different first, so
Yeah.
the results came out at the reel, and everyone's going, "How do you? Who's won this?
Mhm.
Because as Cheryl said, it was simple maths.
Yeah.
8, 5, 3, it was simple maths. But
Yeah.
I just remember looking at the results and going, I don't know. And I went, I haven't got a first. I can't possibly have won. Because that was the thing. And as it
Yeah.
was, Leslie had got a first, and came in. I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 other two dance. I know she didn't get in every place, every dance. But the point system, very much as it was at that time, placed Leslie first. And that was it. It was. If it had been another year, it might have been, so under the new system of points, it would have been me, and it wasn't. So Leslie was the rightful winner in that particular year. But it was close. So therefore, one thing, when the new system came out, one of the first things I actually did was I went back and rescored that. I went, yeah, I agree with these ones.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
accountant in you, Helen. That's the maths coming through.
Yeah, that's the accountant in me. Can't help it.
No, that's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, another question for you, Helen. I asked Gareth this yesterday as well. It seems to be the championship that we get regularly the most number of ties that I can remember. Particularly in modern times. It's obviously what we do now is we try and break the ties as quickly as we can, rather than having them sitting in the stand and waiting for 20 minutes to know where they're lucky to be the winner or loser. Do you think there's any? I guess a couple of questions. Do you think there's any reason for that? And is this the fairest system we've got for breaking the tie? Should there be some sort of world champion dance off or something else that we do?
Oh, that's an interesting point to put forward, Deryck. There's a few things you've said there. It's very difficult to say if it's the best system, but it's a system that seems to work in all other championships. I do think at the end of the day, you have to have one world champion. I honestly believe. I think to say it was equal, only if our system couldn't split them. Within a dance off, God, right? I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure. Especially, if you think of the number of dances you've done over that period, what dance do you choose? An interesting one, though. Interesting. I don't know if I necessarily would have liked to have done it the day that I was died. I'm not sure. But then again, Cheryl just said that Highland dancing brings out or develops a resilience. So perhaps one to debate.
Yeah, you definitely learn a lot. I mean, I never once tied at Cowal, but you'll learn a lot from going. We talked about that luck and the fine margin and being that close, to winning another world championship. And as you said yourself, a different point system or a different anything possibly would have changed that. But winning a worlds and nearly defending coming second the year after is still absolutely special, Helen. And it's something that I can see you're massively proud of, which is
without a doubt. And you've already mentioned that the event in '86, and I'll say the event in '86 is totally up there with the worlds, winning the worlds without a doubt. And it kind of reinforced my own belief in how what I was like as a dancer.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't remember an awful lot of the event. I'm sure I was 15 or 16. That's what I can recall and remember. It was at Meadowbank, and we did it across various different stages. And I think there was a national in there as well. I don't even think it was just all Highland, if I can recall. But that's about as much as remembering that and remembering you won the event. That's about as much as I can remember.
Well, it was very different from our usual events. It was the fling, sword, sheen shoes. I think it was Highland Laddie and the lilt. And it was spread over a whole evening because they had a Highland Games in between. You had to be a world champion to take part, and I'm sure you had to be 16 and over, Deryck. I'm sure it was the adults group, and it was such an array of dancers. When you actually just looked around, it was quite I don't know. I just find it kind of awesome. You looked at the people that were all on the stage at the time, and it was shorter steps. I'm sure we didn't do long steps. And the reason I'm saying that is because at the Alva Games, the time, probably about 5 or 6 weeks before it, but 5 weeks, I went very badly over in both my ankles. You know, you don't do one, Helen. You know, I did it in the fling, and I just kept going, and then I did it again in the hornpipe and with the other ankle, and I couldn't dance leading up to that. So I did an awful lot of work in the pool. So I had a fantastic physio, doing a lot of work in the pool. And the first day that I danced on solid ground was the day before that competition.
Brilliant.
Oh my goodness.
Amazing.
But as I said, I had a really good physio, and I was very well strapped up. And just again, I think it's a wee bit like what happened before. If you just had the drive to just go, well, let's see what happens today. You know, I wasn't, you know, I as I said, 84 was run up. 85, we've talked about it being a really tough year. 86, I got married, so I was in 7th heaven when we did that. Right. Okay, so I was just probably one of those just the right moments in time for me, and it was a tie as well.
Oh,
it was a tie as well, and I remember I was sitting with Leslie, and Leslie and I were sitting chatting away, and the results were coming. They give no individual results, and they just said the top 6 are, and they did it in reverse order who the top 6 were, and it came down to, Deryck, were you third?
I can't remember anything about other than you won, Helen. That's all I can remember.
Well, it came down to that, and there was 2 places to go, and you know, I looked who was there and went, it's one of these days, and they said it's a tie, and the runner-up was Gregor Bowman, and then I speak, and I remember, you know, just Leslie and I looked at each other, and I went, me? You know, it was really funny. It was a bit of a surreal moment because we didn't really expect it.
Yeah.
It would be nice to see something like that done again, though.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think so, because it was just a one-off. It was special. It was something different as well. And I'm with you. I'm with you, Helen. I'd like to see something like that again. Heather, I'm going to come to you and take you back to 1992 at Cowal. And you did a special Highland dancer that won the junior championship in that day. I thought she was absolutely gorgeous. You know, it was natural talent. She must have been a joy to teach as well. What do you remember about the year that Estelle won in '92?
Well, you're absolutely right. She was a joy to teach, and she was a very natural dancer, as you well know. You were her nemesis, of course, and I mean, the two of you could have made a really nice duo, actually, I think. I always thought that I mean, it was just like you were 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, in my opinion. It didn't matter how it went, but it was obviously the two of you, and as I say, in my own opinion. But Estelle was a good worker. She tried hard, she worked hard, but she was a natural talent, you know, as were yourself. I mean, I'm sure your mother made you work hard, but you still had, you know, such good turnout, good feet, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So, you know, those kind of people are rare. You don't get talented people like that very often. My mother used to say 1 in 50, and she was probably right. And you know, but Estelle, you know, at that time too, it wasn't possible for people to go over to Scotland every year like they do now. Yeah. It was a hardship for parents to put together the money to get there and whatnot. So, you know, Estelle tried to go as many times as she could, and I think she did go quite a few times. But it was difficult, and you know, you didn't know what was going to happen when you got there, because, as you say, the wind could have been blowing. I remember one year somebody blew off the stage. I forget who it was. The wind blew them right off the stage. They had to sort of hop down off the stage, and you never knew. But those years were exciting because I think the two of you were very tight, and it was pretty close all the time, you know. And she was a great kid to teach. There's no question about that, you know.
And luck comes into it as well, Heather, because I remember one of the years I beat Estelle. That was also in the Queen's Hall, and that was so close. That Estelle should have won the adult worlds as well. You know, she was these fine margins and luck we talk about. I think on a couple of occasions she probably didn't have some of that luck that she probably deserved, to be honest.
I kind of think that way too, Deryck. I don't necessarily know what years it was, but there was a few years that, whether it was when she was younger or older, I can't remember. But yeah, I agree with you. There was a couple of years that I thought it was really close, of course, and I thought you could have won. But there's the luck again.
Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Cheryl, a question for you. I mean, obviously, a Highland dancing family. You went to Marguerite, but your mum's a renowned teacher as well. I danced with your sister probably more than you.
Yeah,
With
yeah.
Karen, I recall fondly as well. What did you feel the pressure coming across as the multiple US champion coming to Cowal, totally different from anything you're doing, coming from such a prestigious family? How did that impact you?
Well, you have to remember that the US Championship didn't start till 1980. So the first year I came across, I had just been the first winner of the 15 and under that year. So I thought, in my immature, naive teenage brain, I thought that meant I was good enough to compete. And I realized very quickly that it meant I was the best one in the United States at the time, but I still had a lot of work to do to even medal. That first year, I came home with a lot of certificates for participation, but not a whole lot of hardware. And I can remember just being so upset by that. And Mrs. Reed would just say, well, you have to work harder. You're going to have to work harder, and you're going to have to work harder. And by the end of the trip, I was so tired of hearing you're going to have to work harder. I came home and worked harder. And then the next year I went, it really was like night and day. And I figured out how to flip a switch. When I arrived in Scotland, I had to flip everything that I did in the States was in the States. This was a different animal that I had to conquer. And I had to change my approach. I had to change my attitude. I had to, I always tell when my boys were competing in their athletic events, I always said, you have to find another gear. Just when you think you're good enough, you have to find another gear. And that's what you see, I think, especially in these modern dancers. They have another gear that they throw into the world final. And it is awe-inspiring to watch them do it. Greg, or you had it, Deryck. You were amazing in a world championships. You just got up there and did it. I remember when Helen won it, and you're right. You were as calm as a cucumber. You were serene, and you just danced it. And I thought, gosh, I want to get to the point. I want to be good enough to be able to go to serene. I don't think I was ever serene. My wheels were always turning. Jennifer Lindsay was another one. She had another gear that almost no one in the world could match. I could say that about so many people. Gregor Bowman had that gear. Christine Lacey had that gear. Colleen Rintamaki, Morgan Bamford. It's just awe-inspiring what competition, and as you go up the competition level, how kids, teenagers, and adults respond to what is demanded of them. We don't get to be in the Olympics, so Cowal is our Olympics. And I think that Highland dancers that compete in Cowal probably could compete on the Olympic stage in basically any sport they wanted to. They're just that kind of athlete, and it's awe-inspiring to see. And that was what I tried to be.
Absolutely.
And it was hard. It was hard because, for me, it was hard because my mom couldn't come with me. Like you said, Heather, it was a hardship, and there was only enough money to send me. And sometimes my brother came. Not many people knew he was off in the piping competing. And then when my sister was old enough to come, she was able to come. And then, of course, life gets in your way, and I got married and I had children, and I stopped coming. It was great. It gave, I think the other thing about Cowal was that it gave you skills for normal life. You have the ability to roll with the punches and deal with adversity and work hard. If you look at Highland dancers across the board, they are very accomplished educationally. We have doctors and lawyers and scientists and accountants and teachers, and they're very accomplished individuals. And I think it's the discipline that Highland dancing gives to them that gives them the ability to focus and be successful in all walks of life.
I think that's absolutely spot on. I think the education you get from dancing, it's a different type of dance. It's a different type of education. It does prepare you. It prepares you for the real world, the knocks that you get, the successes in the real world. It absolutely does. I look, my career after dancing, I think I've been successful because of
Mhm.
the drive I got from dancing, because of the way mum taught me, and what I learned from that. And to say, you learn as much, probably even more, from the times that you don't succeed as the times that you get that wee bit of
Absolutely.
lift, and you do succeed. So I think you're absolutely spot on. I'm going to ask you another question while we're here, Cheryl, which is about Highland dancing in USA at the moment. It's so I don't want to go back too far, but going back into the 80s, you'd one world champion in the US in the 80s, two in the 90s. You didn't have any in the noughties, unless I've done the maths wrong. And then suddenly from 2010 onward, winning 7 world championships. It must be an amazing time to be in the US and to be part of Highland dancing in the US. What do you think has changed? Why suddenly is the US, right on the map as a contender for these big prizes?
Because I think Linda Armstrong is a really good teacher, flat out. Those dancers from 2010, 7 straight world championships, those are Linda Armstrong's.
Hmm.
She has a model, and that obviously she can recreate. And she's figured it out, and her dancers are tremendously hard workers, and they have another gear. And whatever she does with them in their preparation throughout the year, I don't think it's something she does in August, like Heather
Hmm.
said. I think the work is done through the year, and she just gets them to the point where they walk on the stage, they hit another gear, and they walk off. I remember when Barrett won her juvenile one, and that was a close competition. That group was really tight, and as you watched it, I remember sitting there, and they did the reel, and I thought, she is still fresh as a daisy. She's hitting her marks and she's doing everything. And I watched the year that, again, we had a tie between
Hmm.
Aaron and Michelle,
Michelle.
right? Michelle, beautiful dancers. And they were, I mean, I can't even imagine standing on the stage and they say it's a tie. I can't even imagine saying or feeling that. But I just think that Linda has a model, and they're inspirational to the upcoming US dancers, to say that it is a path. It was so hard to break through in the 80s as an American dancer. And it required a lot of work and a lot of hard work and a lot of luck on your side, because you've got great Canadians, and you had fantastic Scottish kids, and the Australians were coming across, and it's hard, but it's grown, and I'm really happy to see that it's grown, and I hope that it continues to grow, and there are other dancers who can have that moment where they could stand on the stage and hear the world champion is from the USA. It's a pretty cool moment, since it's so rare. It is a really cool
Absolutely.
moment.
Yeah, no. And success breeds success as well, Cheryl.
It
It's
does.
with Linda bringing up that standard in the US, the whole standard, everybody gets pulled up, and
Absolutely.
it's a magical thing. It's a magical time to be, certainly when we get back to doing competitions again, and coming across it, it's fantastic just to see the US back on the map where they deserve to be.
Oh,
Absolutely. A question for you, Heather, I guess similarly, which is, Canadian world champions, 80s, 8, 90s, 14, 2010, 2010, 9. That's absolutely staggering. How come Canada keeps managing to roll out the brilliant talent year after year, Heather?
Well, I think one of the reasons is because there's a lot of good teachers in Canada. Dancers with talent are spread out between all these good teachers, So
mhm.
it's not like the case in the US where there's pockets of dancers, and anyone with any ability goes to one or
Mhm.
two teachers or 3 or 4. But in Canada, certainly there are good teachers in almost every area. So if you're lucky enough to get somebody to walk through your door that has some talent, then they're going to be good. And that teacher will push them to be good because they're in a competition too with other teachers. So it becomes a bit of a circle. The teacher wants to create a champion dancer because she wants them to be the Ontario champion, and then they want to be the Canadian champion, and so on. But we've got, like, maybe I'd have to guesstimate that there's at least 15 teachers in Canada that could produce world champions.
Yeah.
If
Mhm.
the talent, if they get the talent. I mean, you know, you've got to get the talent in the first place. If you don't have the talent, you can't teach a champion. So I sometimes feel sorry for teachers because they're good teachers, but they just don't get the people coming through their door that they can make into a champion. So that's hard too. And also too, you get in Canada, we have pockets again of like the BC area is a strong area, and the Edmonton Calgary area is strong, and Winnipeg's strong. The Toronto area obviously is very strong, and the Maritimes are very strong. So you get all these areas competing against each other. You're bound to get a lot of very good dancers. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree. I think you've got that good crop of teachers across. There's some great young teachers as well coming up, Heather, in Canada.
Definitely,
that,
definitely.
you know, are very, very successful. Helen, a question for you about the pandemic. It's obviously we're all looking forward to getting the competitions resumed again. How hard do you think that's going to be for the dancers to get back? What I would say, competition fit. They can keep themselves fit and get the technique, etc. You know, probably practice like they've never practiced before, I expect, to make up for the competitions. But you know, that in no way, you know, gets you ready for that competitive fitness that you need to be competition sharp and to be that hungry. How do you think that's going to be?
It'll be very. It's one of these things, Deryck. I'm actually going to think back to myself, and I'm trying to remember what it was like. In '87, I had my son, and I came back dancing in '88. So I had a good number of months that whereby I wasn't dancing. You can imagine that. Almost, it was about a year. And the preparation, I did a lot of fitness work, but when you actually came to dance on the stage, it was really difficult to try that real competition sharpness.
Yeah.
That's what I think you're talking about. And it was absolutely essential that I actually remember going to more competitions than I would normally have gone to, because the age I was obviously in the latter stages of my dancing career, having to look after my body and my legs. But you had to get out often and just get over that kind of I'm going to say a rustiness, a sluggishness, something that there was. You just had to build yourself back up. Part of it was also confidence that you're working away, like these people do working away, but you've got no benchmarking through that time. So you've got no benchmarking on how you're competing, how you're doing. So I think it will not. You can't just expect them to go and turn up and perform at the first championship. I think a good series, 6 to 8 weeks will needed of regular competitions just to get that sharpness again.
And of course, at the moment, we don't even know if they'll be doing 4 dances, Helen. It might be back to your first Cowal when social distancing might say we can't do the reel.
Yeah, without a doubt. And it's quite a balanced. Three dances actually, I think, is quite balanced, because you've got the fling, the big turnout, the nice stature, you've got the sword, strength, split high cuts, the sheen shoes, graceful. So there's 3 dances, I think, that you need kind of 3 different approaches. The reel's a wee bit of a combination of the kind of fling and the strength dance again. So it could it's quite nice having 3 dances, because it may be more balanced. You might not have so many ties.
And again, it might well have different outcomes. I mean, I nearly always needed the reel to win a championship. That was one of my dances. Being able to be strong at the end of the dance, 16 high cuts, keep that strength going, and you take a dance away from a championship potentially, as we might have to do, and it could change the dynamic of that competition.
Yeah. It could.
Absolutely. Heather, I'm going to ask you something that back to 2007 now, back to the year that Fiona won. Fiona won the Worlds, and if I recall from that year, you were actually part of the official party as well that year. You were the president of Scotland, Canada, and you were sitting there in the room. And again, I'm absolutely certain, knowing Fiona like you did, that she wasn't a kid that expected very much. She worked very, very hard, and worked hard and deserved everything she got. And suddenly to turn up at Cowal 4 straight firsts, and I wasn't the compere that year. I was actually in charge of the scrutineer, so I knew the result because I was carrying them across. And I was standing there looking straight at you as she won the fling, she won the swords, and the look on you at the swords was quite incredible. Then, of course, I think it was kind of, it was relief in the Shintos as well, which was, wow, this is incredible. And then I don't think you could believe it when she won the reel as well, 4 dances in a row. What do you recall about? Is that a big one? Is that one big blur for you, Heather? Do you recall it the same way I did?
It is kind of, and I remember Christine Lacey was sitting beside me, and she had to sort of, somebody said Fiona's won or something, and she poked me and said, "Do you know she's won?" And because I was like, I don't know, I had no reaction. I don't think, because I was so shocked. I didn't, especially the 4 firsts.
Yeah.
Fiona often did well in the fling and the chanteuse, but you worked hard with her on patabas and the swords, and they must have been improved because she did well. She won it. So I mean, it was a blur. There's no question about it. A delightful blur. Her mother, sitting in the sands, even said to somebody sitting beside her after the result in the chanteuse, Nancy turned to somebody and said, "Has she won it? Can somebody beat her now?" Like nobody could believe it. It was like, and it was exciting. There's no question about that. I don't know whether you know this or not, but my mother was still alive at that time, and she was living, of course, in Victoria. And she had always hoped for Fiona to do well, and she was her biggest supporter and fan. And shortly after she got the result, she phoned my mother, and and my mother couldn't believe it. She was in shock, and finally she spoke, and she said, "Oh, Fiona, I'm so glad to hear this. I can die now." If you can believe that, that's the truth. So that's how much Highland dancing meant to my mother.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I recall her very fondly, Heather, as well. And for Fiona, that was one of these days, everything clicked. It clicked
Absolutely.
in every single dance. We talked about that before, the preparation, the confidence. She turned up in four dances, probably as good as she could do them. And then put away, and that wee bit of luck as well. But 4 firsts, what a great time.
Yeah, I when you were talking earlier about something, something came to my mind about. I don't know whether you remember, Canada had a fantastic skier by the name of Nancy Green, and she was the guest speaker when the Canadians were held at Whistler. And I recall, and it's never left me, and I've told many students that I've told since, that somebody asked her or something, what did you feel like when you won? And she said, the most important thing for an athlete is the adrenaline has to pump on that particular day. And I've always remembered that, because that's like, say, some of you have said you move up another gear. Well, to her, it was the adrenaline. If you didn't have the adrenaline as an athlete and it didn't pump on the day you wanted it to, you wouldn't make it. And she was quite adamant about that. She won her gold medal in a slalom or something, or downhill. And she said that she just knew, she was so pumped with the adrenaline that she just knew she could do it better than she'd ever done it in her life. And that stuck with me, because I think that's what happened to Fiona that day. The adrenaline was just pumping out of her, So, and I'm sure it's happened to all sorts of other people too.
Yeah, it's one of these things. People always say if you could bottle that up and and then use it again the next time. Of course, it doesn't work like that. There's no way of knowing what that formula was on the day when you got up that suddenly made everything work. But what a fabulous memory, and was absolutely delighted for her. Cheryl, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question now about judging. You've judged Cowal as well as dancing. It was topical. And how did that feel from being on the boards as a contender, somebody did so well and came close to doing even better, then suddenly being one of the panel that's sitting there and has got to decide that world champion? What was that like?
I think it was probably the most awesome responsibility I've ever had in judging. I've been fortunate to judge the Canadians, and I've been fortunate to judge Cowal, and I felt an awesome amount of pressure to be unbiased, to be fair, to try my best not to miss anything, and to give every child that came up on that board the best possible chance they could. And I have to say that I was exhausted mentally, and probably more tired mentally and physically after judging than I was dancing. I think I took it really seriously because, as a dancer that dances on the boards, you wanted You wanted a fair panel. You wanted it to be the best panel. You wanted the panel to like you and to want to place you. And I felt like I had a responsibility to those kids to be the best that I could be on that day. And I know it's really hard to dance in a group of, like Helen said, 93. I remember my year, I think in the 85, there was 89 in the adults. And that was, again, the same day. You did everything in the same day and you had your finals. But to judge 89 people is really hard, really, really hard. So like, you know, now you have it in the heats, but it's still hard. You know, it's just a hard, you got to be really on your game. And no one sleeps well the night before Cowal. Nobody. So, you know, you're running through it in your head and you're running your technique through your head and you're dreaming flings and dreaming swords and hoping to God you don't fall off your chair. You know, there's just, I just think it's the hardest thing I've ever done. Really the hardest thing I've ever done.
And I talked as well about, you know, you're dancing on the stage and you've got all these greats sitting watching you dancing. It's the same when you're judging at Cowal as well. You've got legends sitting behind you, watching you judging the dancing at Cowal as well. The pressure is intense.
Well, I tell you, that moment wasn't nearly as I didn't feel that. I knew they were all back there. Your mom was back there and Heather's back there. Everybody's back there. I tried to block them out, but when I judged the Golden Jubilee and I turned around to look at the audience, I wanted to go home. I just wanted to go home. Miss McLaren was sitting behind me. Mrs. Haggerty was sitting behind me. Sheena McDonald was sitting. I just wanted to go home. I was like, no. I am nowhere near qualified enough to do this. I need to go home right now. But I think at Cowal, when I judged Cowal, I tried to block out the audience. I very rarely looked into the stands. I tried to keep my head forward the whole time and not look at the audience. It was the only coping mechanism I had.
No, I think that's fantastic. I mean, obviously we've got you know, no judges this year, but looking forward to seeing what happens again next year when for sure we'll be back in the same place.
God willing.
And Heather will have her seat at the front of the stand like she always does. Helen, I'm going to ask last question for you. You know, a question around, you know, what makes Cowal so special? You know, I mean, there has been, you know, I know, I'm aware that there's been talk, you know, several times about, you know, well, you know, you could, if the World Championship wasn't at Cowal, you know, would it still be the World Championship? You know, you know, what makes Cowal so special? Is it the week? Is it Dunoon itself? Is it the stadium? Is it everything? What makes it all come together?
Well, in my opinion, what makes it all come together is, number one, is the timing. Number two is the tradition. I am one that you know, tradition has got an awful lot to do with understanding why you're there. I think just the pure atmosphere, and I would say that when the pipe bands and the athletics and the cycling going on, there was much more busyness involved in it, and it was in it the atmosphere was electrifying at times. Whereas now it's very focused and very concentrated on the dancing, and you know, just being in that outdoor arena, I can think of only marginally other arenas that I've danced in outside that have been like that, a bit like the Garden Festival in 1988. It was special, you know. It was an amphitheatre and it was all around the dancing. That's special. So I think that's what it is with Cowal for me, is, you know, is the timing, the tradition, just where it is, and the kind of focus and the aspect of Cowal.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think these outdoor championships are special. There's something about dancing outside. Even though we've got the tent, it's different conditions. It's still outside dancing. The way I think the way Highland dancing's meant to be. You can sit back, you can watch it from a distance, you can watch all 8 dancers from the stand at the same time. I think, you know, it's just not something that'd be easy to actually recreate anywhere else. It does make it absolutely special.
It does.
Yeah, Heather. Last question from you. Other than Estelle and Fiona, you know, what is your outstanding moment at Cowal? You know, as I say, you're ever present, sitting in the stand there, watching everything that goes on. Have you got one moment in Cowal? You know, was it that record that Colleen maybe won, or or Morgan winning at such a young age. Is there one Cowal moment that lives with you? You just think, I was there?
Well, certainly, I've always said that Colleen Rintamaki, for my money, was the best Canadian dancer we've ever produced, and maybe even one of the best in the world. Certainly up there. She would certainly be in my top three. And so every time she danced, I really always enjoyed Colleen, and she was such a lovely person too, which helped matters, But I think what sticks out in my mind the most was actually the first time I was there, 1959, and I was so impressed. First of all, I was dazzled with the dancing in general, but I was so impressed with Gordon Yates because he was a fantastic dancer, and then he went on to London, to the London stage and whatnot, and appeared in Applause with Lauren Bacall and all sorts of wonderful things. But he was sort of like really special because he wasn't just a good Highland dancer. You could tell that you were really looking at a real dancer. He was special. And for me coming over from Canada, and you have to understand that that time, and it's all coming back to me as we're looking at all these movies that are now digitized, that we were such, oh my goodness, the dancing we were doing was out of this world, horrible. I mean, we were really bad. Like the balance step in the chanteuse, the idea was to kick your legs up as high as you possibly could, hopefully as high as, so that your kilt had went way up in the air and your underwear was probably showing, but that was okay. That was part of the deal, The higher you could get your legs up, that was good. And the first step of the chanteuse, you were brushing up to the sky, and we were absolutely dead horrible. I mean, it was disgusting. And then when I got to Scotland and saw people like Gordon Yates, it was mesmerizing to me because it was so refined. I mean, Tartan Town's going to put up a video or a movie or whatever you call it these days, at some point in time, of me doing the jig. First of all, I'm in a satin costume with shamrocks on it, and it's like a ballet dress with ruffles underneath. And in the slap step in the jig, where you go change, and break, Well, I didn't go around twice in a circle. I went around 5 times on that turn. I was like a whirling dervish. And it's just hilarious. And when people like Fiona and the kids I teach now watch this, they think, oh my God, was it possible to be this bad? I mean, it's really bad.
It was a lot quicker though, Heather. You did dance quite a bit quicker.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true.
It was more difficult to hit these right positions. I mean, I saw some of the early video footage of Mum dancing at Cowal, and I know it was 8 steps, but it was probably done within the same time as we do our 6 steps. It was, the positions weren't held. It was a different type of dancing.
But you just finished saying positions. What were they? That wasn't part of the deal. It was how good you and what kind of flashy arms you used, or I remember one dancer she did high cuts at the end of the swords, just so that the judge would watch her at the end of the swords. She threw in 4 high cuts at the end. Things like that. I mean, it's quite hilarious, really. I mean, you really roll over laughing, and I'm not kidding. And so as I say, when I got to Cowal and saw the likes of Betty Jessamine and Gordon Yates, and they were so refined, and elevation wasn't really part of the dance at that time. I mean, they did elevate, but it was so controlled, and their bodies were so controlled and whatnot. I was mesmerized, and so has always stuck with me. I've always felt that, while you want the elevation and strength and whatnot, I feel sometimes nowadays we're going too much to that degree. I like to see guys with that kind of elevation and whatnot, but I like to see girls a little more refined. I like to see them use their elevation, but I like to see that strength with refinement as well. And sometimes I think we're pushing the elevation thing a little bit and dancing out of time a lot for that reason.
Yeah, and again, Estelle had all that. I mean, Estelle was refined, and wasn't too strong. You managed to nurture Estelle perfectly, absolutely. So no, brilliant. That's a great story about the high cuts at the end of the swords as well.
And they used to go around the last step of the swords. They'd go around backwards, like they actually go around backwards, because that would catch the judge's eye too. And at the end of the fling too, you threw in a couple of leaps and an entrechat.
Oh, that's absolutely brilliant. Thanks, Heather. Last question from you, Cheryl. Obviously, looking forward to getting the competitions again. What insight or what tips would you give any young dancer at the moment thinking, I'm going to go to my first Cowal next year. I want to get back on there. I want to set myself on this Cowal path to success. You know, we're in a pandemic. There's no competitions. You know, what would you like to say to them? How can you motivate them to get, you know, to actually keep themselves going to get out there in August back on that platform?
I think that's a great question, because I think we're all struggling with that. And I think now is the opportunity to take those movements and steps and positions that perhaps are not your strongest work. And you really have the opportunity to break everything down back to its basics. Like Helen was saying, that Irene really focused on the basics, making sure that you're shedding and your back steps and your rocks and your potty bars and your high cuts and your shuffles, and all those basics are the best they can be, you know, and maybe even doing a little bit of mental preparation when we get back to the point where you can go back on the boards, is prepare. What do you remember it like to be in a competition? You know, but really take this time to do the work that you're not always able to do, because we're going from competition to competition, bigger, bigger, bigher, building, building, building. We really have that time to step back and look analytically at what we're doing. You know, perhaps high cuts are your weak spot, or potty bars are your weak spot, or whatever it is. Make it your strength, you know, and do the work. Do the work all year. The work doesn't happen in August. It doesn't happen in July. It happens from September to the week before Cowal. You have to work 12 months of the year, 365 days. That's where it's done. And I think that's what makes the greats, is they did the work. And I think practice kind of has a bad connotation. Nobody likes to practice, but I think you just have to learn to spin it the right way, where the practice is giving you the opportunity. Create an opportunity for yourself. You know, you don't know what that opportunity will be. You might get a medal. You might be a runner-up. You might win, you know, but you can't get to those stages if you don't prepare.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely great advice. Great advice, Cheryl. To be honest, that advice is perfect for anybody in any sport at the moment that's trying to do it. And you know, I hope that resonates, absolutely resonates with any dancers watching this that are wanting to come across to Cowal next year. Well, I'm going to wrap things up now. So can I just say it's been an absolute pleasure having the three of you on this session. So many thanks to Cheryl, to Helen, and to Heather. And I'm assuming we'll all see you across at Dunoon next year for the championships in 2021, and I think it'll be an absolutely fantastic event. So once again, many thanks, and thanks also to everybody that's been watching this. Thank you.
Thanks, Deryck.